Hey guys, it's the Bottom Line View here, starting a new series on my channel. I'm going to count down a lot of top 10s from now on, starting with a very controversial topic. We got the top 10 greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. A lot of discussion over this topic. I'm sure though this will be one of my more popular videos since one of my most successful videos so far has been the Joe Montana and Tom Brady comparison video, which has stirred a lot of conversation in the comment section. So hopefully we get the same results on this as we did on that. But I'm going to give you my top 10 greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. So I've spent a lot of time watching footage, of quarterbacks that I was never able to see, and then also going back looking at their statistics, going deep into statistical categories, comparing each other, comparing a ton of quarterbacks. And these are the 10 that I would say are the greatest in NFL history. To make this list, you have to be consistent. You had to win to a certain degree. No, you didn't have to have 4 Super Bowls to be number one, or you didn't have to have 3 Super Bowls to be number one, because NFL and football is the ultimate team sport. So no, winning is not the biggest category, I think, but everything put together, statistics, how much of a leader that player was to his team, winning, different statistical categories, how much he hurt his team. Turnovers are a big thing for me, like touchdown interception ratio. That's a big thing for me, because it really shows how much you're helping or hurting your team, and then how they played in big moments. So those are all categories that I go over in this video, and I have a ton of statistics to prove why this guy deserves to be in his spot. So let's get started with the honorable mentions. First of all, there's some honorable mentions that almost made the list. There's 4 that I've written down, but there are a ton of quarterbacks that could have maybe made this list and probably make other people's lists. So here's the 4 that I've written down. Drew Brees, current quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, great passer, very consistent throughout his career, gaudy statistics, might end up with the most passing yards in NFL history, the way that he's going right now, if Peyton Manning does not get that. Because Drew Brees, year in and year out, has been relied on to carry the Saints, at a time he was on the Chargers when he was young, earlier in his career, wasn't really carrying his team that much, but you could still see that he had great potential, and he was still one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Now he's with the Saints, obviously one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Didn't have a great season this year, but still very, very good quarterback, and very underrated in the history of the NFL wise. Next, Kurt Warner, another very underrated quarterback in my opinion. The only thing that really hurt Kurt Warner, he has all the statistics, all the numbers to make it. He won a Super Bowl, so that was good, but he wasn't consistent throughout his career. He only had a few very good seasons. He won the MVP in '99. He was very good from '99 to about 2001. He dropped off after that. I think he got hurt, and he ended up going to the Giants, which hurt him, went to the Cardinals, which rejuvenated his career, had a couple very good seasons with the Cardinals, and then ended up retiring. So he had that midpoint in his career where he was very inconsistent, which a lot of great quarterbacks don't show. So it's hard to put Kurt Warner on a top 10 greatest quarterbacks list. But if you're talking about maybe one season, he's possibly in there. Another is Troy Aikman. Great quarterback, great leader. The Dallas Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls, but he didn't have the numbers and really didn't carry his team as much as these other quarterbacks did. NFL Ultimate Team Sport, as I said, he had probably the best offensive line of all time. Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, a great defense. So it's very hard to say that he was the reason why they won their championships because he didn't have the greatest statistics either, and he had very good coaching. So Troy Aikman almost makes the list but doesn't make it. And Terry Bradshaw, for you Super Bowl counters, Terry Bradshaw does not make this list. Sure, he has 4 Super Bowls, but I'm pretty sure his touchdown to interception ratio is probably the worst out of all these people on this list. Reason why he doesn't make it. I think he had a couple seasons where he threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns. I see the era, but really he wasn't that great. Seeing as how his team is probably one of the best top 5 teams of all time, especially the defense, which is top 3, and then you have 2 Hall of Fame receivers, a Hall of Fame running back. So it's hard to put Terry Bradshaw in the top 10. So those are my honorable mentions. Let's get down to number 10, which is older player, probably the oldest player. Yeah, definitely the oldest player on this list. Played in an era that was pre NFL, and then he played in the NFL. Otto Graham. Otto Graham is definitely, for you guys that are Super Bowl counters, the winningest quarterback of all time. He won 7 championships. He won 3 NFL championships and 4 AAFC championships. So that's basically the AFL. He won 5 MVPs in his time as a player, which is outstanding. 3 in the NFL and 2 in the AAFC. He had very good statistics for his time, which is what really impressed me when looking back at all these quarterbacks. He had very, very good statistics. He had an 86.6 passer rating, which was very impressive for that time. He threw for 23,000 yards, which is pretty good. He was relied on heavily for his team to win. That's why he was named 5-time MVP. And he was just amazingly successful. I don't know what to say about this guy. He was like, they went to the championship 7 out of 10 years that he played, which is pretty unreal. They called him Automatic Otto, so definitely one of the most dominant players of his era, and one of the most dominant players in NFL history. He had 114 wins and only 20 losses, which is the best percentage in NFL history. And he still holds the record for the highest pass yard per attempt, which is 9. So obviously back then, a lot of their passes were deep passes, so that would make sense. But still, that's still impressive. Nowadays, pass-heavy NFL, Otto Graham to make it on this list is very very good for him, because for him to really be that dominant in that era, being a quarterback, very hard to do. So I had to give him his due there. He's number 10 on the 10 greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. We go to number 9, which is Steve Young. Steve Young, quarterback, played for the Bucs early in his career, played for the 49ers, where he really started to shine under Bill Walsh and other coaches. Just very good passer and also a very good runner of the ball. He has the most touchdowns in NFL history for a quarterback, which is impressive, seeing as he's a white guy and he was known for passing the ball, which is why he held the most passing titles of all time. He held 6 passing titles for passing yards, which is the most of all time. 33,000 yards passing, 232 touchdowns with only 107 interceptions. That's a 2.17 touchdown interception ratio. And if you don't know what that is, that means how many touchdowns did he throw to interceptions? So he threw basically 2 touchdowns to every interception. 3-time Super Bowl champion, even though one of them was as a starter. He had a point in time where he was really he was known kind of as the Dan Marino of the NFL. He couldn't win the big one. then eventually he ended up having a fantastic performance in the Super Bowl and probably one of the greatest ever for a quarterback in a Super Bowl. He won two MVPs, and had a 96.8 quarterback rating, which is the second of all time under Aaron Rodgers, who plays in a totally different NFL. So Steve Young is a very underrated quarterback, in my opinion. Very efficient, and every statistical category he shines. Even rushing the ball, as I said, one of the greatest rushing quarterbacks in NFL history. So he could really do it all. To get to number 8 now, a quarterback that I very much compare to Steve Young, Aaron Rodgers, guy that I just talked about. I have Aaron Rodgers at number 8 because I've never seen a quarterback be able to do things that he does. He is fantastic at every single physical area of the quarterback position. He has every physical tool that a quarterback would want. He can scramble. He can get out of the pocket. He's mobile. He has a fantastic arm. He can throw the ball across the field. He's accurate. He's very smart. So he has every tool that a quarterback would need. He's just not quite there yet in terms of his career to put him higher on the list. But he's a one-time Super Bowl champion, very much led that team to the Super Bowl. Without him, they definitely wouldn't have won it. Two-time MVP. He won an MVP this year, had a fantastic year. The one thing that impresses me the most about Aaron Rodgers is his touchdown to interception ratio, which is freaking incredible. He has a 3.96 interception ratio, which is almost 4 touchdowns to 1 interception. That is incredible. I don't care what time of history you play in. Aaron Rodgers definitely proves that he deserves to be on this list just by that alone. 226 touchdowns to 57 interceptions. That's insane. I didn't mention he won the Super Bowl MVP. 65.8 passing percentage, which is very good. 28,000 yards already, and 106 passer rating, which is first of all time. A couple records he already owns, not records, but things that he's done. Led the NFL 3 times in touchdown to interception ratio, 2011, 2012, and 2014. He hasn't played for that long. He's probably the most efficient passer of all time. Like I said, Steve Young, very efficient passer. He's probably second. And he's led the league twice in passer rating. So I have Aaron Rodgers at number 8. Like I said, physical tools, his statistics. He's already won a Super Bowl. He'll probably win another one. So I'm going with Aaron Rodgers at number 8. The man who was in Green Bay before Aaron Rodgers, I had Brett Favre at number 7. The Iron Man of the NFL. He's known for his streak of games that he went through the NFL. Just even with injuries, he would still play. The guy is probably the toughest player for a quarterback to ever play. That's why he's so respected throughout the NFL and through the players that he played against. He's a one-time Super Bowl champion, which sort of hurts his debate for a top 5 quarterback. He's a 3-time MVP, which is very good. During the 90s, he was probably the best quarterback in the NFL. He was very good. He was similar to Aaron Rodgers in the way that he was so physically gifted that it was hard to stop him. Most touchdowns ever until Peyton Manning broke it this past season, 508 touchdowns. But the thing that hurts Brett Favre, 336 interceptions. That is the most of all time. But that's just the way that Brett Favre played. You know, you were going to get good or bad. You just didn't know. Classic moment is when he was playing for the Vikings against the Saints, trying to go for it all, scrambles outside the pocket. That was during the Bounty Gate to defend him. So he was getting smacked during that game, but still, he scrambles to the outside, tries to throw the ball across his body, and Tracy Porter picks it off. They could potentially have gone to the Super Bowl and maybe won. But his interception or his touchdown to interception ratio is still decent at 1.5. 86 passer rating. That kind of went down once he got older, even though he had very good seasons with the Vikings and the Jets. 71,000 passing yards, which is the most of all time. probably until Peyton Manning breaks that. But Brett Favre, statistically, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, physically one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in his prime. Got to give him credit there. 62 completion percentage. Sorry. So Brett Favre's number 7, and the greatest Green Bay Packer quarterback as of right now. Dan Marino is number 6. Maybe the greatest passer of all time. He was the first to throw for 5,000 yards in a season, the first to throw for 40 touchdowns. Held numerous records when he retired. He held like every record there was, like passing yards, passing touchdowns, until Brett Favre ended up breaking that. And Brett Favre probably wouldn't have ended up breaking that if it weren't for the longevity that he had. He had an 86.4 passer rating, only a 59.4 completion percentage, but he threw the ball a ton. 61,361 yards. And I don't think there's ever been a quarterback that really carried his team as much as Dan Marino did. Maybe John Elway, but Dan Marino really carried his team to the Super Bowl that one year, to the playoffs, and they never really had much around him, which is kind of sad. If Dan Marino maybe would have been in a different situation, we would be talking about the greatest quarterback of all time. Maybe if he had 2 Super Bowls, we'd be talking about the greatest quarterback of all time. I don't really know. But Dan Marino, probably the greatest passer of all time. Just unreal player. One-time MVP as well, which I was kind of surprised to see that going back in history. I know he had that amazing season, which could be still the greatest season by a quarterback of all time, because you got to think about back then, passing really wasn't developed. It was developed, but it wasn't developed to the point it is now. And there aren't offenses that we see now where it's basically like the passing game. The short passing game is the running game nowadays for some teams, like my Patriots. But Dan Marino, that season that he had 48 touchdowns. The next closest guy, I think, didn't even have 30 touchdowns. So that just goes to show how dominant he was back then. So Dan Marino is number 6. Going over to my other page of notes, we got number 5, John Elway, who I just spoke about as being one of the most important quarterbacks to his team. John Elway is above Dan Marino for me because he was more of a winner. He took his team to more Super Bowls. He took his team to 5 Super Bowls, which is second behind Tom Brady. He won 2 late in his career where he had a very good team around him. He had TD at the running back position, Rod Smith at wide receiver. He had Shanahan as the coach. One-time MVP, one-time Super Bowl MVP, 51,000 yards, which is very good. 79.9 quarterback rating, not that great. That kind of probably keeps him out of the top 4, in my opinion. 1.33 ratio. The reason why I wouldn't have him in the top 4, or some people even have him at number 1, like Matt Sims, his son. Matt Sims on Bleacher Report often refers to John Elway as the greatest quarterback of all time. Or Chris Sims, sorry, not Matt Sims. That's another quarterback. Chris Sims often refers to John Elway as the greatest quarterback of all time because of how he was able to carry his team. And he was often, as he says, he was often like, he would do so many things to try and get his team to win that he would end up making a mistake. So like Brett Favre, he would try and make so many big plays that he would end up throwing an interception or fumbling or something. But I don't really care, to be honest. I think it's still the mistake on the part of the quarterback. Like, there's times where Brett Favre, more than not, or John Elway, they would try and make a play that just wasn't there, and they would end up making the mistake. But still, 300 touchdowns, 226 interceptions, only a 56.9 completion percentage. But again, his team for much of the 80s he carried, like the drive in the AFC Championship. You could tell that he carried the team once they got to the Super Bowl, and they really were no match for some other teams. He took he took teams to that shouldn't have been there to 6 AFC championships. So that's very impressive. And he retired as the most accomplished quarterback of all time. So once he retired, he retired as a 2-time Super Bowl champion. He had the most yards out of any accomplished quarterback. He had the most touchdowns. So John Elway, number 5, I would say. Johnny Unitas, number 4, paying tribute to the Colt great. We got 1-time Super Bowl champion, 3-time NFL champion, 4-time league MVP. That's for both leagues. He introduced the 2-minute offense. So something to do with Johnny Unitas, and the reason why he's this high on my list is because he very much introduced a lot of things to the quarterback position. He introduced no huddle, a lot of the 2-minute offenses that we see, a lot of the modern day passing that we see. He had very good receivers back in the day. A lot of his receivers were all-time greats. He had a 78.2 passer rating, which is very good for the time, seeing as how the defenses were all the rules were towards the defenses to shine. And that really didn't change until the early 2000s. 40,000 yards, 290 touchdowns, 253 interceptions, 54.6 completion percentage, 1.15 touchdown interception ratio, which is still good because if you think about the good quarterbacks back then, like Joe Namath, he probably had under 1 for a touchdown interception ratio. Bart Starr probably had under 1. I'm not exactly sure. Terry Bradshaw, I don't think had over 1. So a lot of the quarterbacks that he was compared to, he was a lot better than. He held a record for 52 years, okay? He held a record for 52 years. The streaks with the touchdown pass, which is incredibly impressive, until Drew Brees broke that, which was like in 2011, I believe. And Drew Brees and Tom Brady were both going for the record, and Drew Brees ended up going farther than Tom Brady. But Johnny Unitas held that record for 52 years throughout the whole 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, all the way to like 2011, which is incredible. To throw a touchdown in that many games. So for that time, for a quarterback to throw that many touchdowns in a row, just shows how great Johnny Unitas was, especially with his 4 MVPs and his championships. So Johnny Unitas is number 4. I have Peyton Manning, the greatest regular season quarterback of all time, at number 3. Why do I say greatest regular season quarterback of all time? Obviously, 5-time MVP, 97.5 quarterback rating, second of all time, 69,691 yards, 530 touchdowns, which is the greatest of all time, 234 interceptions, not bad, 65.5 completion percentage, incredible, 2.26 touchdown to interception ratio, very good. But postseason, 11-13, 64 completion percentage, only 6,800 yards, 38 touchdowns to 24 interceptions, which is a lot different than his 530 to 234. A pedestrian 88.5 quarterback rating. And even when he won the Super Bowl, on that run to the Super Bowl, he only threw 3 touchdowns and threw 7 interceptions. 2 of those games, I believe, they played the Chiefs in the first one. The only reason they won that one is because of their defense. Ty Law picked off Peyton Manning 3 times in that game, and they still were unable to win. Peyton Manning, still 1-time Super Bowl champion. They beat the Bears. His greatest game in playoff history is definitely the comeback against the Patriots in that AFC Championship game. But other than that, really, his defense carried him to that championship. He's still a 1-time Super Bowl MVP, 1-time champion, 5-time MVP, fastest to 5,000 yards, fastest to 4,000 completions, fastest to 400 touchdowns. Most seasons with 4,000 yards, most touchdowns in the season, 55. most yards in a season for passing yards, most touchdowns ever. So still a very accomplished quarterback. But the reason why he's not number 2 or number 1 is is that he wasn't successful in the playoffs and wasn't successful in the biggest moments. The guy has had I believe over 9 or 10 um, first game losses, so one and dones in the playoffs. I don't care who your team is, you have to show up. If you're the MVP of the league and you're not playing well in a playoff game, that's mostly your fault. I don't really care if your team it relies on you a lot. If you're not showing up and you're the regular season MVP and you're supposed to be the best player in the NFL, you have to show up in the playoffs. So Peyton Manning is number 3 for his amazing statistics, incredible ability to read defenses, intelligence. So he's probably the most intelligent quarterback that's ever played. But when times have come tough, Peyton Manning has not really shown up to the best of his ability. Number 2 and number 1, if this were last year, I would have this man at number 1. But because of the past events of this past season, I swapped these two men. I have Joe Montana at number 2. And I'll explain that some more once we get to number 1. But if you've seen my Tom Brady Joe Montana comparison video, which you should very much watch if you haven't, there's some reasons there why I pick Tom Brady over Joe Montana. But I think everyone knew that these two are coming down to it. These two are definitely the greatest above everybody in terms of NFL quarterbacking. Joe Montana, 2-time MVP, 3-time Super Bowl MVP, 4 times champion out of 4, 92.3 quarterback rating, 63.2 completion percentage, 40,000 yards, 273 touchdowns, 139 interceptions, ratio of 1.96. Very good, very good. Everything's very good there. Highest Super Bowl quarterback rating in 127.9. No Super Bowl interceptions. The greatest Super Bowl quarterback of all time, no doubt. Most postseason games with over 100 quarterback rating. Joe Montana is still probably the greatest playoff quarterback of all time. Maybe Tom Brady, but Joe Montana just in clutch moments, amazing. Joe Montana is amazing. He did go to 4 Super Bowls and won all 4 of them now. People say that Tom Brady is not greater than Joe Montana because he lost 2 Super Bowls. Well, first of all, like I always say, football's a team sport. Then again, what about Joe Montana losing NFC championship games and NFC playoff games? Does that not have anything to do with losing in the playoffs? Tom Brady still has the greatest winning percentage in the playoffs and in all time in regular season. So if you're talking about winning, Tom Brady's probably still better than Joe Montana in that facet. Now, the reason why some people would have maybe Peyton Manning over Tom Brady is their statistics. Tom Brady is still very, very good in that category. So we're going over to number 1 now in Tom Brady. 2-time MVP, 3-time Super Bowl champion, 4-time Super Bowl champion, or 3-time Super Bowl MVP, 4-time Super Bowl champion out of 6 appearances, 95.9 passer rating, which is 6th of all time, 21-8 in the postseason. That's the most wins of all time in the postseason. 2010 only unanimous MVP of all time, 63.5 completion percentage, 392 touchdowns to only 143 interceptions. He's 5th in touchdowns. Yards, 53,258, which is also 5th of all time. Ratio is 2nd of all time, only behind Aaron Rodgers with a 2.74. He has the highest winning percentage of all time, fastest to 100 wins, most yards and touchdowns in postseason history, most division titles for any quarterback, most consecutive regular season postseason wins with 21 games in a row, most consecutive passes without an interception, 2-time passing yards leader and 3-time passing touchdowns leader. In the postseason, Joe Montana is still the greatest quarterback statistically in the postseason. winning wise, I would say Tom Brady is the best quarterback in postseason history. Now we compare Tom Brady to Peyton Manning in the biggest moments. So obviously Tom Brady's 21-8, 53 touchdowns to 26 interceptions. So Peyton Manning was 38-24, which is a big difference. Tom Brady still throws 2 more interceptions, but he has about 15 more touchdowns. 89.0 rating. Tom Brady's also played. He's played more games. He has 5 rushing touchdowns as well in the postseason, which I think is pretty high up on the list of all-time quarterback rushing touchdowns. 7,345 yards, which is a lot more than Peyton Manning's, and a 62.9 completion percentage. I think where Tom Brady really goes over Joe Montana now in his legacy is that game against the Seahawks. I don't think Joe Montana ever played a team quite like the Seahawks, in the Super Bowl at least. Maybe in the NFC Championship game, but not in the Super Bowl. The Seattle Seahawks, if they would have potentially won that game, we would be talking about a top 3 greatest defense of all time, top 3, or one of the best teams of all time, like that team in the year before to go back to back, one of the greatest teams of all time. Tom Brady playing in the salary cap era where he has to play with so many different people, so many different receivers, so many different running backs, players different on defense. You know, he had good defenses in 01, 03, 04, slid off till about they had a decent one in 07 where they went 16-0, but Tom Brady and that offense still carried them. And then this past season where they had a pretty good, not a good defense, but a pretty good defense and a great secondary, I would say. So that's why they won the Super Bowl this year. Once you got Tom Brady some help on defense again, they ended up winning the Super Bowl. Tom Brady's been able to do anything that quarterback has been asked to do throughout history. And he's been able to do it with so many different players. I think that's the reason why he's number 1 on this list for me. Joe Montana never really had to deal with that. And Tom Brady's only had one really great receiver for a short period of time in Randy Moss. Sure, he's had Rob Gronkowski, but Rob Gronkowski is a tight end. He's not a receiver. He's used mostly in a very good way in the Patriots offense, don't get me wrong, but Joe Montana just has had the chemistry with all his receivers for when he was playing for so many years. It didn't really matter. And same to do with Peyton Manning. He's had to deal with a lot of different surroundings as well. He's probably had a more consistent supporting cast around him than Tom Brady has. And better offensive players for sure. That's probably why he has the better statistics than Tom Brady. But they never really gave Peyton Manning a great defense. And the only time that really showed was 06 when he had a decent defense during the playoffs, or a good defense during the playoffs. They showed up, and that's why they won the Super Bowl that year. Peyton Manning had a good defense in Denver as well. But his early years as a Colt, the Patriots would run him over. But Tom Brady still, overall, regular season, postseason, if you're looking at a legacy of a quarterback, Tom Brady's got to be number 1 in my opinion. Joe Montana, the greatest playoff quarterback of all time, number 2. Number 3, we got Peyton Manning, the greatest regular season quarterback of all time. Johnny Unitas, the greatest older quarterback. I don't know really how to put that. But before the modern era, Johnny Unitas, greatest quarterback of all time. John Elway, number 5. Number 6, maybe the greatest passer of all time, in Dan Marino. We got number 7, Brett Favre, Iron Man of the NFL. Aaron Rodgers, number 8, young gun, definitely probably going to rise on this list. Steve Young, number 9. And number 10, we got Otto Graham. Another honorable mention I forgot to talk about was Rodgers Staubach, who I actually had 11th. So Rodgers Staubach was very close to making the list as well. But if you guys have your own personal list, please leave it below. I'm going to post this link and post my Joe Montana Tom Brady comparison to get more in depth in that. That was last year, so it still doesn't count this past year's accomplishments by Tom Brady. So it's very hard to really compare quarterbacks when their career isn't over. Like Aaron Rodgers, he's on this list for me. So the only place he can really go is up unless he starts playing really bad. And Tom Brady, his legacy is only going to rise, same as Peyton Manning. So um, thanks, guys, for watching the greatest quarterbacks of all time, top 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time in NFL history. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed my efforts for all the statistics that I had to come up with and all that. I'm definitely going to be doing more of these lists. Comment below if you want to see specific lists of the top 10. And thanks, guys, for watching. Please subscribe. It's Bottom Line View. Peace.